You're listening to Delayed Replay, the podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe for various reasons, but came out on time in our universe, and therefore come out pretty different for some reason. You might think this is improvised, and well, that's on you. I'm Steven Shinder, and welcome to the show. Airing sometimes every other week, sometimes one week and then the next week. It really depends. Just roll with it. Season 7.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Shinder, and the topic of this episode is another installment of a 3D animated film franchise. And you got the dad who has the 3 kids and is dealing with stuff that his daughter, who's growing up, wants to go out and do. And it's not Shrek 5. Sorry, I know I teased Shrek 5 the last time, but stuff came up, so I'm rescheduling with my friend a different week. It might be weeks from now or in a month or something, but that episode will come once things are in well aligned for that. But in the meantime, I figured I'd move up one of the topics in the schedule as a placeholder here, and that topic is the Angry Birds movie 3. Yeah, I know. Shocking, right? So, my other self couldn't make it to this one either. He has not seen the second movie as of when this is being recorded, so he's behind. I watched the second movie before the third one came out in May of this year, 10 years after the first movie came out. So, there's quite a gap there. The first one came out in 2016, the second one in 2019, and then 7 years later, you go ahead and do a third movie, which in itself might feel like kind of a risk because several years later, is the audience even still gonna care? But then again, the games are very popular, the Angry Birds mobile games. I've never played, but I've seen others play, as even adults older than me. Back when I was in high school, probably I knew at least one adult who played it on their phone. And yeah, it seems like it might be kind of an addicting game to some. I've personally never really seen the appeal of it. It just kind of looks like slingshotting birds to get points or something. And the animated films, I don't know if there is much other source material within the world of the games or any other Angry Birds media there is, but as far as plot goes, the first movie does try to do this conflict type of thing, one side being the birds and fighting the other side, these green pig looking things, which I believe are also from the games. Um, yeah, these pigs that get launched. It's actually been quite a while since I watched the first movie. I didn't watch it until 2023, so 3 years ago now. So my memory of it is hazy, but according to my letterboxd, and I did remember that I really disliked the movie. In fact, even before I watched it in full that year, I do remember I saw a scene from the film a few years prior to that, and it was the pee related scene, and I thought it was disgusting. Yeah, these Angry Birds movies, they are kind of reliant on pee humor. Now, in the second movie, they're is not as much of that I can recall. I mean, you do have a character who's like at the urinal or something, but there is still gross out humor like pig snot and like one of the characters gets covered in that and licks it. And yeah, this is really disgusting. Even more so than anything in the new Evil Dead movie, which end of this episode you'll hear my other self review a Evil Dead Burn. So yeah, that'll be something for you to look forward to, and he'll review some other things as well. But yeah, so the third movie going into this, um, I kind of hoping that some of that humor would die down. But no, there's even more P humor. So I should talk a little bit about Red's journey throughout these movies. So in the first movie, he's part of that war. In the second movie, things are peaceful and he's really questioning his place. You know, what's his place if things are peaceful, which is an interesting idea to explore. But the movie really explores it in a really boring, generic way. These movies really make me appreciate other animated movies even more. You know, the ones that actually create original songs, like some of the classic and even recent ish, you know, last decade or so or whatever Disney movies, they have original songs. And in some of these other animated movies by other studios, uh, you know, whether it be DreamWorks, Sony, or Paramount, you know, this Angry Birds movie is it Sony or is it Paramount? I don't even remember off the top of my head, but a lot of these animated movies rely on hit songs, and sometimes those types of needle drops happen so frequently throughout the movie that's annoying. I do remember, you know, you might get that in Mario, the Mario animated movie universe, but to me it feels so lazy, like it's just a shortcut to get a song that you can sing along to in there, or it's something nostalgic or familiar or something. And it's like, yeah, these movies are for kids, uh supposedly. I mean, there's the gross out humor, a little bit of maybe adult humor, but I guess they're also trying to put in stuff for the adults who are kind of have no choice but to go see these movies or stream them because their kids want to see them. So, you know, give them something to latch onto. But there are other movies, you know, like Shrek. Let's talk about Shrek. Those Shrek movies, they have these hit songs as well. You know, even, you know, Holding Out for a Hero, you know, that was in Shrek 2 and that was in Angry Birds 2. And, you know, rest in peace to the late Bonnie Tyler, of course. Quite a huge legacy that she left. But the Shrek movies feel like they earn the songs. The humor is at least clever throughout the Shrek films. And the Angry Birds movies, they are not very clever. You know, especially, you know, the first couple, they feel very generic and tropey, get from point A to point B in such an unexciting way. So it really does feel too corporate when they rely on these hit songs and don't really feel like they're trying much else in the movies. You know, the second movie tries to give Red kind of a love story, and it's like, oh, here we go. We've seen this predictable type of plotline again. And in this third movie, you know, there's a time skip, and he's raising three kids. I have their names here. You've got June, who's played by Emma Myers from Wednesday. June is the, you know, the independent teenage daughter of Red and Silver, you know, the oldest well, let's get to Glider. Glider is the eldest son of Red and Silver. So yeah, there's only one daughter here. So yeah, this movie, it's a bit of a mess, this movie. So I'm still like getting back into the groove of remembering the stuff that happened. But yeah, you've got Glider. He's the oldest teenage son, and played by Walker Scoble from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which, I still haven't finished the second season of that. And since that season has aired, I've heard people say that it's kind of gone downhill, but I don't know if it's from people with good faith criticisms or if it's from some other side of fandom. I don't know, but um, yeah, who knows? But yeah, and then you've got the youngest, the hatchling son, Ollie. And Ollie is voiced by Psalm West. So you've got Red in this babysitting dad type of role. It kind of reminds me of The Incredibles in some ways, because the hatchling is really causing a lot of trouble, and Red has to get all of his friends to help him out. Kind of reminds me of Incredibles 2 in that fashion. So yeah, again, there's a lot about this movie that just reminds me of other better movies. Even if you think Incredibles 1 is better than 2, 2 is still better than the Angry Birds movie 3, at least this far into the movie. And you get these antics, like, that P related gag that I alluded to, which I don't even want to really talk about. And you also get these issues where Red is having a hard time bonding with the teenage offspring, and they're very much more talking with their friends, and they really want to go out and explore the world beyond this island that they know. So, kind of similar to the whole Shrek 5 thing, the daughter wanting to go out and see the world. So, but yeah, so you got this going on, and Red is like, no, you can't go out there. That's too far. But you, of course, get the obligatory sneaking out type of plot. And so Glider and June, they kind of are foils to each other, bickering back and forth, but they have this same goal where they want to explore whatever is out there. And so they try to sneak out, try to fly as far as they can, beyond the island and the water. And then they sort of hit a wall, an invisible barrier. And they're really confused by this. And when Red and Silver find out about this, and they really give them a scolding, and they're coming up with excuses, but like, oh, you never let us go out or whatever. But then they get to the tough conversation where they mentioned the invisible wall. And this is when Red and Silver realize that they have to tell their kids the truth, which they apparently learned a while ago. I don't know when. The movie doesn't explain when they learned this or how, but that they live inside of a mobile game, and that the reason nobody can journey beyond this invisible barrier that they see is that this mobile game that they're in didn't have more space designed for it in order for the characters within to journey beyond it. Now, this is such a huge pivot for these types of movies. And, uh, so you got these teenagers going through this existential crisis, which really tough for teenagers to really grapple with. I mean, at that age, it's like you're really trying to figure out who you are in the world. And so, even questioning existence. And so when you find out that you are kind of an artificial being, it's like, how do you deal with that as a teenager? And so this was kind of gripping in a way, but so, again, this movie still gets muddled in some of the stupid humor and the hit songs that keep playing now and then. Um, like, yeah, I don't know. There are these very lazy songs. Like I know Firework played at some point, and it, during a point where there are no fireworks at all. It's pretty much just when they were trying to fly to the invisible barrier. But yeah, you got these crazy existential questions going on. Red and Silver trying to comfort their kids, and this is kind of a heartfelt moment where Red is maybe finally bonding with the teen children of his, but they they almost bond, have a heartfelt talk, but then instinctually kind of try to push their parents away because they're like, you lied to us, you never told us the truth, and it's that whole thing. So really annoying seeing this mood whiplash going on here, when there's such potential for a really interesting story here. And again, I'm reminded of other better animated movies like Wreck It Ralph. Like that came to mind during this whole thing. So yeah, there's not quite a whole lot that they try that feels wholly new. Now, I will say that it is kind of interesting when they try to journey into the real world. Like this is midway through the movie, the kids, they try to slingshot launch themselves the farthest that they can, trying to do all these calculations to figure out how to go that far. And so when they eventually do manage that, they're able to be flung as far as they can until they crack some sort of glass, and we kind of get this zoom out and they crack the glass of a phone screen. And so now we see the live action world. They break the screen, they come out, they overhear a human coming by, and they, hide out on the other side of the table that this phone is on. And the human is played by the the main actress from that Netflix show Never Have I Ever, and she looks at her phone and is like, "Oh, my screen cracked. How did this happen?" And so it's kind of a relatable moment there, the cracked phone screen. But it's also so jarring seeing this live action world and these 3D anime characters. It once again it feels like the Smurfs movies. Again, thinking of other animated projects that have already done this territory, and it's like, what are the characters doing differently here? They don't really do that much different. They explore this park, this like live action park. They see someone playing frisbee with a dog. The dog smells the birds and tries chasing after them. They eventually evade the dog, who goes back to the the dog trainer. And meanwhile, back in the 3D animated Angry Birds world, Red and Silver are looking for their kids, and their friends are trying to help them out, help them find them. And they uh, find the slingshot and basically, retrace the steps, and they end up going into the real world. And I kept wondering to myself, did they cut the animation budget and this is why they're doing this, doing these live action shoots instead and putting them in the movie? Because for much of these sequences, you can tell that the animated characters are not really in the scene. They don't really try very hard to make them blend into the live action environments. And I mean, I would say it's disappointing, but I mean, these are Angry Birds movies, so the bar was already low for me. But when you have this existential stuff going on, you kind of hope that, oh, maybe finally something interesting will happen for these movies. But No, it just feels very run of the mill. They have the initial terror of being in a live action world and these jokes about how ugly live action people look, and the live action birds as well, pigeons and stuff. Um, it just feels very been there, done that type of thing. Now, eventually they do find the kids at this the kids try exploring this house and accidentally end up in this basement, which is flooding because the washing machine uh kind of became damaged because the kids are playing around with it. And so the parents and their friends have to save the kids from this flood in the basement. And yeah, I'm not really feeling any stakes here. I know that the nothing bad is going to happen to the kids or to any of these characters, really. Uh, this film really meanders and really felt like it could have been tighter, but I don't know how you make a story like this tighter when there's not really that much to salvage, really. So eventually they're trying to find their way back to the phone, but it's being taken to the cell phone store so that the screen can be repaired. And they're like, oh no, once it gets repaired, we won't have a way back in and we'll fade away. Because, now and then they notice that they're getting all staticky and that they figure that they're going to disappear if they don't get back to their world. But then you also have these talks where the kids are really worried because they're like, well, if we go into the mobile game world, we'll still have a limited amount of time, right? Because they could just delete the app willy nilly or turn off the phone, turn off the game. They don't quite know how everything works, but they figure, since we're on a device used by these people who are far bigger than us and beyond our world, we really have no agency and no control over how we can live our lives, without worry. And Red tries to calm them down and saying, "Look, we might be characters in a game, but what I feel about you three is real. Our love for you is real, and that's enough for me." Now, the game could get shut off at any moment, but as long as I'm with all of you and our friends and all the people that we love, well, at least we'll all be together in the end whenever that may happen, even if it is out of the blue. And I get that this was trying to be a heartfelt moment, but it kind of didn't feel organic how this sort of made the kids feel better. Like, I would still be worried hearing this if it were me in this position. Like, yeah, we could die at any moment, but this is supposed to be a movie for the family, so they have to have the obligatory type of uh speech where things are supposed to be okay, and you have the music trying to feel and sound emotional, and that kind of manipulates the audience into buying in, if they are able to be manipulated in that way through these movies. And so, they sneak into the cell phone store and, um, oh, I forgot to mention that when they were inside of the, um, before leaving the mobile game world, they saw the 7-Eleven symbol. I guess that's supposed to be an ad that's like on the game or something. Um, Kind of fitting given that this delayed replay episode comes out on 7-Eleven day, but yeah, there you go, I guess. So they go into this cell phone place, which the whole gimmick of this cell phone store is it is shaped like a castle, and that's what the logo looks like. It's a fictional cell phone company. And so they have this elaborate thing where they have to sneak in And the way that they do this is they steal this remote controlled helicopter, and a couple of them have to take the remote and control that. And, they crash the helicopter through the glass door of the cell phone place so that they can fly right in. A lot of breaking glass in this movie, and I don't know that that's very nice to show in a movie made for families, but I mean, what do I know? Uh, so they sneak in and are able to get back into the phone one by one before the screen is repaired. And they end up landing in a meadow kind of far from their town. And so you kind of have this last minute type of obstacle that honestly really takes forever. And you do see like the repairs of the phone screen going on still, even though that's no longer relevant. And the person repairing this phone is apparently also a part time motorcycle repairer and is wearing like a motorcyclist outfit, the stereotypical jacket and sunglasses and helmet. Kind of a strange type of character to use here. I don't really know what that added. I guess it's supposed to be some extra bit of humor for this, but yeah, I don't know. It was kind of just there. So they're making their way through the meadow, and it's also ends up being kind of a peaceful family trip in a way. Finally bonding with the kids on this trip away from technology. There's this whole thing about how June was very addicted to her phone and basically living in her phone. But now that she knows that she literally lives inside of a phone, I guess she's trying to enjoy her surroundings some more, which I thought was kind of nice in a way. Um, Kind of weird to think of the idea of living inside of a phone. I mean, this podcast gets distributed to apps that are on cell phones, so in a way, it kind of feels like we're living in a phone. Um, and yeah, when you text people, sometimes you're your more authentic self. So in a way, it's almost like we put our true selves inside of cell phones sometimes. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting too heady with this. But yeah, so we get some family bonding, and eventually they make it back to their town. They have kind of a farmer's market trip, going grocery shopping and having a nice dinner. We get to see them enjoying their mundane family life. And the movie, it ends with this very happy go lucky type of tone. They play Mr. Sandman for some reason. And I don't know if that's supposed to be, I don't know, signify like the sands of time, because like the film kind of fades to black before going into credits. And I kind of wondered if that was supposed to signify that the mobile game world was shutting off or something. But yeah, I don't know. It just goes to credits and you don't see any bloopers or gags or mid or post credit scenes or any of that. So in a way I kind of admire that went with that ending. But yeah, I don't know. This isn't I can't really give this many marks because there's not a whole lot that this movie does differently from other animated movies. It feels kind of a hodgepodge, similar to how the Emoji Movie felt like elements of other better animated movies and just not done well. So, I guess with that, I could go into the final thoughts and score out of 10 for the Angry Birds movie 3. So, this was a really generic movie. The first one, I think I gave a 3 out of 10. The second one, a 4 out of 10. This one is better, but not by much. I did like the existential questions. I just wish that they had been explored in a more unique way. So again, too many gross out humor type of things that these movies couldn't seem to evolve out of. So I would give this 5 out of 10 cell phones, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of a ridiculous, measurement. I guess I don't know. It was an end to a trilogy, I guess. Um, hopefully. I mean, I'm not a real fan of these movies whatsoever, and I'm not sure that I know anyone who really is. But yeah, I also forgot to mention the second movie had that Baby Shark song, and that made me like it even less. So yeah, annoying stuff like that, needle drops, that too reliant on that sort of thing without being clever. Um, yeah, not a fan of this film series overall. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Angry Birds movie 3. And I guess going uh, to the plugs, you can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on mobile games. Do you still play any? For me personally, mobile games, they never caught on for me. It kind of just feels like, I don't know, I'd rather play a game on a console or even on a computer, like a laptop or desktop or something. But yeah, there you go. You can follow me at the social media listed in the show notes. You can go to stevenshinder.com for info on my standalones and stepping stones novels. You can check out Yes Shift, a podcast that I do with my dad. Did a news episode recently, and we're doing a 5th anniversary episode coming soon. And yeah, check out um, whatever I'm involved with. I don't know. So yeah, that's it for now. And next episode will be something a little bit more different. I won't say what it is yet, just in case things change up, but we'll see. But until then, without further delay, here's my other self to talk about some of the stuff he's been watching, including I Am Frankelda, Voicemails for Isabel, The Long Walk, and Evil Dead Burn, and anything else that might come up that I'm just not remembering. So, without further delay, here he is. Hey everyone, Steven from that other universe. And yeah, Angry Birds 2, the Angry Birds movie 2, I guess, is pretty bad. So, um, yeah, not looking forward to whatever version of the third one comes out in my universe. Who knows if I'll ever get around to that. But anyway, since this topic is an animated movie, I might as well start with I Am Frankelda. And from what I understand, this stop motion movie from Mexico is a prequel to a 5 episode series. So watch this in Spanish, this movie, have not seen the series. Um, yeah, it's made in Mexico, and it's got it's kind of a musical in a way because it has a few original songs and they sound really good. And it's about this Frankelda is this girl who has this book she's the author of, and the characters within, one of them is this uh bird looking thing called a terror. He and his parents are terrors and they look kind of owl-ish, and they also have this uh conversation about, well, if we're fictional, do we not exist, type of thing. But yeah, there's some things that feel a little inorganic and some things that happen that kind of escalate too quickly. But I think the film overall looks really good, really well made, and there is charm to some of the character interactions. But yeah, I think overall I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I definitely recommend watching it. It's cool to look at. Could have been enhanced a little bit more in the writing. But yeah, definitely glad to have watched that. And other animated stuff, still keeping up with my adventures with Superman, X-Men 97, those have been good. Um, Rick and Morty is still going on. Sometimes it can feel kind of weird, a little repetitive, but still have some compelling moments. But yeah, that's a thing. And as for other movies I've been watching that are new or new-ish, I watched Voicemails for Isabel, and this stars Zoe Dutch. Now, I had been hearing people talk about this movie as if rom-coms are so back or something, which we've still been getting rom-coms over the last few years, and some of them are pretty good. Um, I quite like People We Meet on Vacation, but Voicemails for Isabel is a movie that pretends it's like You've Got Mail, which I know You've Got Mail has a weird thing of trying to put the Meg Ryan's character out of business type of thing, and then all this stuff happens. But Voicemails for Isabel is about this this woman whose sister has died, and so she's leaving voicemails for her at her number as sort of a journaling device. And it turns out that the number is now on a work phone of this other guy who's in the movie, and he overhears the voicemails. And at this point, you would expect that he would do the right thing and say, let her know that these voicemails are getting to him. But no, it takes a while, and he decides that it would be romantic to go and meet her. And, he doesn't want to seem like a creep, but he ends up looking like a creep anyway. But the movie tries to romanticize certain things. Now, she has realistic reactions. Zoe Dutch has great performance with the script that she's given. And I'm also interested in this other plot that she's going through where there's competition at work at this restaurant or baking place or whatever that she's working at, and it's kind of intense. But yeah, it's a really weird movie. I give it a 6 out of 10, mainly because I really do like Zoe's performance. But if that performance weren't as strong, I'd probably give it a 5. So yeah, I don't know. You could watch it and be the judge of it. I also watched The Long Walk, which is now streaming, and it was an interesting uh sort of premise to watch, these characters and the type of walk that they go on and the intensity of it. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, it can get one thinking. It's not a movie that I feel like I would rush to watch again though, so maybe I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. Now, Evil Dead Burn. I'm a huge Evil Dead franchise fan. Since the Evil Dead Rise episode of this podcast, since the podcast put out the Evil Dead Rise episode years ago, back, 4 years ago or whenever, since then I have read the majority of Evil Dead comics that are out there. And even way before then, I'd seen playthroughs of a few Evil Dead games, and there are different continuities and universes and stuff. The quality really varies when it comes to the non-film and non-TV stuff. And my other self's thoughts on the franchise prior to Rise on that Evil Dead Rise episode pretty similar to mine. And I thought Evil Dead Rise of my universe was pretty good. But when I rewatched it recently in preparation for Evil Dead Burn, the references to the older films did stick out more, and it was kind of annoying. So kind of dropped that one to a 7 to 7.5 range for me. But Evil Dead Burn, such a wild ride. It picks up from, and no spoilers, but it picks up from the the first few minutes of Evil Dead Rise actually take place after the main events of that film. So in a way, it's like in Evil Dead Rise from a few years ago, you get the post-credit scene at the beginning, which is kind of smart because yeah, now you don't have to sit through all the credits to get to that type of thing. But yeah, I wonder, maybe in that other universe, Evil Dead Burn actually begins with that opening scene, and it's more makes more sense timeline wise. Yeah, that sounds vaguely familiar. Did I dream that, or I don't know, but yeah. So, um, I don't know if I overheard that that might be the case in that other universe or what, but yeah. So, Evil Dead Burn, it picks up from there and then kind of goes into a different direction and focuses on family and in-laws drama. And I don't want to say too much, but it really does feel like another one of those well, I don't mean in a bad way, but it's another horror movie that delves into the topic of trying to get past a certain trauma. And I know that with horror, some feel like we've been flooded with those types of stories in the past decade ish, but I thought that it was really well done in this movie. And this was quite a wild ride because for some of the movie, I was thinking, well, this might be a 7 for me. And then something really distressing happens, which if you know me and what can take me out of a movie, you might be able to guess. But something happens that made me think it could drop to a 6 or even a 5. But as the movie kept going with all the insane action and gross out moments that you would expect from an Evil Dead movie, it climbed back up. And by the end of it, I thought it was so well done that it was an 8. And it doesn't rely so much on callbacks. There are bits of lore here and there, but the lore doesn't overshadow the main story. But for those who like look into the lore, it kind of feels like it's maybe trying to connect the other movies together, perhaps. I don't know. I'd have to give this another watch. Probably won't rewatch in the theater, but I do definitely want to watch it again when it's streaming. And where was I? Let's see. I talked about the scores. Climb back to an 8. Um, the effects were really good, and there were a couple moments where I was really impressed that it didn't go with the obvious things that you would expect from Evil Dead movies. Kind of subverted my expectations. And yeah, I thought this was really refreshing in that sense. I will say it does have a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. The post-credit scene kind of stupid, kind of doesn't make sense. And I heard that maybe the studio sort of forced them to put this in there, which reminds me of how the post-credit scene of Saw X feels that way. Like incredible film Saw X, but then you get the credit scene that doesn't make any sense as just there for fan service. But yeah, apart from that, and apart from perhaps a couple awkward humor moments and a too distressing moment, this was a really enjoyable Evil Dead film. I think my current ranking would be Evil Dead 2 is at the top, probably an 8.5. And then below that is Evil Dead 2013. And then below that is Evil Dead, um, which one was this? Evil Dead Burn. So those are both around 8, but this is slightly below 2013. And then in fourth place, I think this could be kind of a toss up because I know the original Evil Dead, some of the acting is pretty bad, but the effects and the scare factor kind of stick with you. So for now, I'll say The Evil Dead, the original one is in fourth place, and then Evil Dead Rise is in fifth place, just below that. And then if I had to include the TV show Ash versus Evil Dead, I'd put that below, like maybe at around 7 out of 10. And then at maybe 6.5, I would put Army of Darkness. That's still my least favorite because it feels the least like an Evil Dead story because it feels too studio-ish. It was under Universal and too much daylight, too much humor reliance. So yeah, there you go. And I am also of the minority opinion that the Evil Dead movies, the more recent ones, they work better without Ash involved as a character because Ash became a character that you expect to just always be invincible. And so if he were in either of these last few movies as a main player, it would feel like there's not as much tension because he's never gonna die, and you don't really want to see him die. So it's better to follow these newer characters, focus on them instead. I've seen people say it's not Evil Dead without Ash. I disagree. The Evil Dead are the Evil Dead. The Deadites and the book and the whatever related lore happens. Yeah, this felt very Evil Dead to me. Um, really impressed. Probably currently, out of the movies I've seen from this year, it might be my third favorite. Well, I or fourth favorite maybe. I count The Amazing Digital Circus: The Last Act as kind of a movie. I put that at the top. Then Project Hail Mary in the 9 out of 10 range, and then around the 8 out of 10 range, or maybe 8 to 8.5, I have 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and then below that I have Evil Dead Burn. So yeah, really satisfied as an Evil Dead fan. All right, so I guess that's it for now. This podcast will be back next time. So um, I think next Saturday. So we'll see what the topic ends up being, both have further delay. Have a good day.